Today we're going to be getting into some really heavy territory. I'm going to be talking to my friend Nyssa, who is one of the most passionate and creative people I've ever met, about how she grew up in a family of drug users and how that has changed her life and given her a really unique perspective on some of the key problems that society is facing right now. So you grew up in a family of drug users?
Yes. My mum and dad were both heavily into intravenous drug use before I was born. And then they were in a lot of trouble before I was born. They were caught stealing a lot of computers from the government. And there were a couple of news stories about it, but during the term of the trial, I guess, they conceived me, and Nyssa actually, their whole story with it is that Nyssa means new beginning, and that was meant to get them sort of on the right track and out of what they were doing, because they were doing a lot of drug dealing and crime to sort of support their addictions. But I guess things didn't necessarily go to plan because they didn't really stop doing drugs after I was born. That sort of just continued, and I wasn't aware of it for a long time because, as a kid, you don't really know what your parents are doing unless they tell you. So it kind of, as I grew up, it became more and more obvious, like a few times I would find like needles in the yard and stuff like that, and they would freak the hell out when I brought it to them. They're like, did you take the cap off? And I thought at the time that was pretty normal because, obviously like your parents would be freaked out if you found a needle in the yard.
So you didn't really realize that it was from them?
Yeah, exactly. And then when I realized that they were drug users and they had been using needles and they had never really stopped doing that, they also both had Hep C as a result. And it started making sense that when I found these needles in the yard and they freaked out had I touched it, it's because they knew that needle, it wasn't just a chance, like they knew 100% that thing was infected. It became more and more clear, I guess. By the time I was 16, my mum had started talking to me about it and telling me that, she was on speed and meth and whatever she could get her hands on. Coke was her favourite thing, but it's too expensive and hard to get. So she developed a pretty heavy addiction to meth pretty quickly. And I don't know, like now she's sort of made her choice, I guess. She still does that stuff and there's not really much I can do about it. And I guess I never thought that our family was that weird, like I went to a state school, like, there were other kids there and it seemed like I wasn't that different. I mean, it's not like I was super popular at school or anything. Yeah. I definitely wasn't like socially very good, but I never really put that down to my parents being drug addicts,
Yeah, you can't really compare your life to other people's lives because you don't see everybody else's behind the scenes sort
exactly. So like, I thought everything was pretty normal. And then sort of like, as you grow up and hear about other people's childhoods and how, most people's parents like never did drugs or some shit like that. Yeah. It's very different. I guess it sort of opens your eyes to that side of things, but then I guess like I have shared a couple of my stories publicly and I've been amazed with how many people have hit me up since then going, I know exactly what you mean, I had a childhood like that, or I had problems with drugs in my life as well. And I never knew that about them and they don't share that information because for the same reason you don't want to because you're scared. You think you're the only one, you think people will judge you, and I guess there is like a lot of self-esteem issues that come from being like from just like a shit family or whatever. Like we were pretty poor for most of the time and I didn't really know why. My parents had like crazy mood swings all the time and I didn't really know why. You start to figure out that when your mum comes home at 3 a.m. from the valley and just pumps music, it's a little weird. But you sort of don't figure that stuff out until way later.
And you said that it was actually your parents that introduced drugs into your world because none of your friends really did drugs.
Yeah, no, I was never really, I was not a very social kid. I was definitely a nerd. I got straight A's and I didn't have many friends. When I got out of school, I made some really good friends who I still know now, and they were never and have never really been into drugs at all. So it was really strange because I know the stereotype is that you get out of school and you fall in with the wrong crowd and you get into drugs or something like that. But for me, the only place that there was a risk of me getting into drugs was from my parents, and my dad would never ever recommend or introduce drugs into my life. He was so against it. Like the way that he felt was the way that he had lived was not how he wanted me to live. He wanted to live rather by warning than example, and he died young because he did those things, and he didn't know that he would get Hep C. He didn't know that, all of that would kill his liver until it was too late. Yeah. So, that kind of thing is sort of the difference there, because after he died, my mum got me and my brother sort of straight into it. And, this is the kind of thing where like we hadn't even smoked weed before or anything like that. So it was like pretty crazy to go straight from like nothing to having your mum like put a needle in your arm and say, this is going to make you feel better.
Yeah. Most kids, they get their first beer from their parents or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and we'd been drinking for a while because I guess my parents were like fairly lenient in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was really, really weird. And because no one really prepares you for the idea that your parents could be the ones who are wrong in your life.
And no one really gets a chance to, because your parents are the first ones to...
Yeah, well, they're the authority for your whole life, They give you food and teach you how to live. And so when they suggest like a really bad life decision, you don't even really think twice sometimes, and you just end up doing something that's like massively damaging.
And once you're introduced to drugs like crystal meth, you don't really learn all of the negative things that come with it. Like no one tells you like you're going to build up a tolerance to this or anything like that.
Yeah, that's it. Like the first time, like when that happened, and it was my first go of that, it's the most intense feeling that I've had ever, like before or since, and it's not possible to get that feeling of intensity again. So it's sort of like that moment pretty much capped the limit on what happiness I can feel.
Yeah.
It really does feel that way. And I think that's why you get so attached to it, is because nothing natural in life, no real experience can compare to the, synthetic release that you're creating in your own brain. And I mean, there's like a massive amount of, depression and longing that comes with that. Everyone wants to feel happy. And if your life is really shitty at the time, mine was, I never thought I'd get into drugs. I was a good student, like I said. I never really thought I'd be that kind of person. But when it came to my dad's death, for me, that was the level of grief that I needed to reach for me to go, fuck it, like I need to feel something, otherwise I don't want to live anymore. Like,
and obviously your mother was going through that as well, and
that's
that didn't
exactly
help her,
what she was doing, and she feels as though drugs keep her from suicide, because she has like pretty serious bipolar problems, and she goes into, you know, these suicidal manias where she really tries to kill herself. Sometimes she's come very close to killing herself, and there isn't really a solution that anyone can give a person who is in that state. And unfortunately, one thing that can bring you from the brink of wanting to end your life is a massive hit of drugs. Like, that will take you out of that mindset and distract you until that shit happens again. It's not a solution, but it's her way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
And, you know, while it wasn't right for her to introduce that to me and my brother as a solution for our grief at the time, I know that that's where her heart was in that. I know it's because it's the only solution that she's found for her grief, and, you know, if that's how she deals with it, then how else would she be able to tell us to deal with it?
How else would she be able to help you? Like, she thought that was it. And you said that she developed bipolar disorder. Was that before drug use or?
No, that's well into her drug use. She got diagnosed properly. I would say that, like, okay, so she sort of started to go crazy when I was about 14 to 15. Things were starting to get weird, and then she really, like, had what they call an episode, and things got pretty much just worse from there. I know, like, a little bit about, you know, how it comes about and stuff, but there is no, like, cure for that kind of thing. And so with her and with bipolar and the drug use all sort of clustered together, it's like a really complicated situation to be in. And, you know, like, you might see her one time and she's just like the person that you remember from when you're a kid, and then you see her another time and she's just like the worst kind of person, like just an example of desperation. And it's really hard to watch someone destroy themselves like that. Like,
especially your mother.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, like, we already lost our dad, and that was, like, definitely the hardest thing that I've had to deal with. But it's, I think, probably quite a bit harder to have to watch someone destroy themselves over a period of, I mean, God, now it's been like 15 years of my life at least that I've actually seen the negative effects. Like, you know, when I was young and stuff, maybe they were there and I didn't see them. Maybe the problem wasn't as bad, so it wasn't there. I don't know. But I started to notice the problems when I was about 15. And, you know, like, I'm 27 now, you know, and it's just got steadily worse. So, you know, you don't want to abandon people. And even when it looks like they're making the worst decisions for themselves, you know that they're not in control of their own decision making. So it's not really a matter of, like, they're doing this or, you know, they're making that choice. It's like they really are in a situation that they don't know how to deal with. Yeah.
And it's not just your mother either. Like, your brother's had issues with his mental health from drug abuse as well.
Absolutely. It was sort of quite soon after my mum introduced us to that. He started to have some really bad problems with just self-control, and he developed a really bad addiction to the needle, to the point where if we didn't have access to anything, he would just be shooting up whatever he could find, you know, like Epsom salts, you know, nicotine inhaler, his own medication that he found in the cupboard, you know, that kind of shit, like anything that could potentially get him out of reality. And then he started to develop some pretty bad sleep problems, and after he'd sort of been awake for about a week, things really started to fall apart, and he was in another world by that point. He thought there were people outside his windows, he thought there was a guy in the backyard with an axe, he thought that there was a conspiracy that we'd all made up, my dad's death, just to teach him a lesson. And that was the point where I started to realize that even though my mum had always said that her mental problems were nothing to do with her drug use, that I really needed to do some more like independent research on that, because I trusted her, you know. And you know, I think that to say there's no link between drug abuse and mental illness is ridiculous. I know that now.
There's a lot of other elements involved, but drug abuse definitely exacerbates.
It's so much. Like any propensity that you might have in your brain for that kind of thing, it really has a tendency to bring it out. And I was so lucky. Like the worst that ever happened to me was, I mean, apart from, you know, the lingering problems, you know, the depression, the anxiety, that kind of thing, I never had to deal with a full psychotic breakdown or any kind of episode like that. You know, for me, it was if I'd been awake for 3 days and I was, you know, at the window looking out to see if there's like any cars going past, like just getting way too paranoid. But that was sort of the extent of it for me. And the weird thing is that out of me and my brother, he was always like the normal one. Like I've always been like a bit weird or eccentric or whatever. But he was like charismatic, into sports, he had heaps of friends, he was like the popular kid that everyone liked at school. So when he had a psychotic breakdown and everything happened to him like that, it really opened my eyes, because there was just no trace of that in him before, you know. He was so outgoing, and that's really changed a lot, and he's sort of coming out of his shell now. He's like doing a lot better than he was. He's like sort of still in the process of getting clean, but it's been a few months since he's used, and that's always like a really good thing. So I think it's really like just how unexpected it was that it would happen to him, because he was just always so normal, you know, like,
he was like the exemplar of like what a good normal kid is.
I wanted to be like him, you know, like he's 4 years younger, but he always had it easier talking to people and getting along with people and just being like charming and charismatic. And I thought for sure that, like, you know, I was the one who had gone to see the psychiatrist, and, you know, I was the one with conformity issues in high school, dyeing my hair blue and being a jerk, like. So to see that happen to someone who was so absolutely normal and outgoing and social, it really made me realize that it can happen to anyone. Like, it's not just about who you are, it's about what you're doing.
And you said that people started to treat him different and everything, and there was like...
He lost a lot of friends because he was just coming out of high school, and all of those like sporty gym friends that he had were like, I don't blame them at all for, you know, being too confronted by what was going on to stay friends, but he's been really isolated since that, because they were not ready for that at all, you know, like they were just getting into clubbing. They could barely drink legally, you know.
Yeah.
They were not expecting to like rock up to someone's house and them just be like doing needle drugs and fucking having track marks all up their arms and just, you know, 3 days without sleep, freaking out.
Yeah.
They weren't ready for that.
And all of their knowledge of that, it comes from like the stigma in society and stuff. So they've got all these negative
yeah,
ideas
absolutely. And it's not even like they weren't into drugs, you know. They were like 18, that kind of age where, you know, they'd go out clubbing and do a couple of like ecstasy pills or whatever. And so I think that there is a big difference in the way society views the method of input as well. Like they were all fine to take drugs as long as it was like the socially accepted way.
Yeah.
You know, like it's normal to do pills, or it's normal to even like maybe smoke a crack pipe.
And that can be just as dangerous or even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, is that like we sort of had so many people turn their nose up at us because we had been junkies, and we never really knew the difference between the stigma. You know, we didn't grow up in a family that viewed people that way, obviously.
Yeah.
So to find out suddenly that what you've been doing is like the scourge of society and everyone hates you now is like, that was pretty tough to deal with.
And you can't just shed that skin, like it's
yeah, well, I
become
mean,
who
you start to
are,
just
like,
instinctively hide it, you know? You don't tell people because you don't want to risk their friendship, or you don't want to confront someone or have them think that you're going to be unreliable or you're still a drug addict because you told them the truth about your past. And I think that kind of thing is really unfair. Like, I went to a doctor after I was clean, and like I really had to sort of rehabilitate myself after that, you know. We removed ourselves from access to it. We stopped talking to my mum for a long time, and I went to the doctor to try and get all the pills that I needed, like just my antidepressants and stuff like that. And I told her honestly about my past and what had been going on and how I'd got myself off meth. And she didn't believe me.
She basically just thought you wanted drugs.
Yeah, totally. And that was crazy because I've always been like, honesty is just, that's what I value.
Yeah.
And to have someone just assume that I'm a liar because I told them the truth about something is insane.
And you're going to the doctor to get help to like continue improving your life, and the doctor is the place that you go for that. You don't go anywhere else. And
yeah, absolutely. And I go to my doctor now, who was my dad's doctor, and he's the only one who has understood my situation because he knew my mum and dad.
Yeah.
He knows what I grew up in, and he actually understands the situation. But he said to me that it is amazing how many doctors have that same belief, that like they'll just not trust someone because they have a history of drug use. And there's a whole lot of actual medications that just say like, oh no, don't give it to the person if they have a history of drug abuse. And it's crazy because you're not in two categories in this world. You're not a drug addict or not a drug addict. You go through different phases in your life, you know. You know, when I was 18, I drank too much. Like, I don't drink anymore, so it's like that's not even part of my life. So I think it's really weird that people hear about like just this one thing that was part of your life, and yeah, it affected me. It's a big part of like who I am now, but it's not made me a dishonest person. It's not made me like go around like trying to steal shit for drugs. Like I don't do that, and I never did, and I'd like to say that I never would do that. So I don't know, like society's views on things can be like a lot more damaging than even I gave them credit for, because before all of that, I was just the like, oh, fuck what everyone else thinks kind of person. But now, knowing that you can so easily get into a position where you need society's help, and for them to just collectively turn their back on you is like, it's a pretty damaging viewpoint for everyone to have.
And it's really hard to open people's minds in society as well. Like, you try and tell a story like this and they just, like, minds just close on you immediately as soon as you start talking about drugs. Or
yeah, I mean, I really think that is the case as well. And, you know, I'm not really worried about offending people or even really having them like think badly of me. Like, you know, like this video could probably go on Facebook and maybe a bunch of people would be like, oh, I don't want to get tattooed by her because she was a junkie. Like, at the end of the day, like, fuck those people. But I think it shouldn't be an institutionalized belief. That's the important thing. Is like, you get the odd racist and you go, okay, well, that guy's a jerk. But when you have institutionalized limitations on what people can access and like the help that they can get and the quality of life that they're able to live, I think it's not a simple matter of just like, oh, they're all junkies, they made their choice. You know, you wouldn't do that if like such a huge percentage of the population were just throwing themselves off bridges. You'd have to really look at that situation and go, why are people doing this?
Yeah.
Because it's not like everyone can't get drugs. Everyone can get drugs. They're all around everywhere.
That's something I'm going to be
getting into. The difference is whether we decide to make that the focus of our lives.
Yeah.
And most people don't, because I think really most people are happy.
Yeah.
But when you're willing to take a big gamble with your life and, you know, just for a shot at happiness, I think there's obviously a problem with mental health.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be doing videos about how easy it is for like a young kid to get introduced into that world as well. I think
absolutely.
So you were actually diagnosed with Asperger's as well later down the track?
Well, before I got into any drug use, I was diagnosed with Asperger's when I was 21, I think. And that sort of explained a lot, but I didn't really look into it until a lot later. I kind of denied that I had it for a long time. And once I looked into it, a lot of things made sense, because I looked into it after everything sort of went down with my dad's death and my mum going properly hard into the drugs and then getting off into the drugs. And it sort of made sense a lot, because most people in my family can sort of tell, like even my brother can tell when my mum is sort of going manic. And I find it very difficult, and that sort of made a lot of sense to me. You know, once I read about having Asperger's and how I don't really understand a lot of people's body language, I guess, and just the way that social interactions go, and I mean really a lot to do with emotions and empathy. And it's not that I'm not emotional, like I very much am. It's just that understanding people's irrational, illogical emotions, which pretty much sums up bipolar like to a T, is so difficult for me.
So you basically just didn't even notice that anything was awry?
Well, yeah, I mean, I got like kind of caught up into her plans, not knowing that it was a stupid plan, I guess, you know? Like, just trusting her pretty naively I mean, still now I, you know, accidentally sort of believe something that isn't true, or, you know, because that kind of thing comes up a lot. Like, when someone has bipolar, they make things up a lot, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to put that.
And you just can't pick up on when she's sort of deceiving you? Or?
I have no idea when people are lying to me. And so that makes things really hard. Just having, people with bipolar and addiction issues, because addiction makes you very secretive and it'll make you lie for a lot of the same reasons as the social stigma and stuff like that, and not wanting to be judged. But also for reasons of, just not being in your right mind. And so that's come up a lot with my brother as well. It took me probably too long to realize that he was as psychotic as he was at the time that he had his worst breakdown. And so that has been really sort of a learning experience, because I feel like I've learned a lot from it.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm more paranoid or anything, it's just that, you really have to be careful with what people are saying to you, and people aren't always lying out of malice or like spite, like some kind of Machiavellian plan. It's often just out of desperation or fear and anxiety, or just because they're not in their right mind.
Yeah.
And so, I used to react really badly when people lied to me, because I've never been able to tell, and because I do have a history of being too trusting, and people will take advantage of that. But I guess now, having seen what the people that I love have been through, and having seen the people I love deceive me quite a few times, you start to realize that lies and liars, they're not always like these evil people. It's not like a matter of like good versus evil, or like these super villains who are like, trying to fuck up your world. This behavior, it has a reason, and it may be self-destructive and it may be destructive to the people around you, but I really think that there needs to be like a logical approach to it, rather than just dismissing those people altogether, because it doesn't solve the problem at all.
And you were saying, like, once you actually accepted that you had Asperger's, because you said that you rejected it for a long time, like, it got a lot easier once you started actually researching it and looking into it and going, oh, I am this way because this. And
yeah, absolutely. Like, it was just the way I was viewing it, and that is a little bit to do with my dad, because my dad was the best, don't get me wrong, but he did have like a lot of sort of older views on things, and I think possibly had he been assessed when he was younger, it could be quite likely that he had Asperger's as well, because the reason why I dismissed mine was because when I listed the reasons to my dad for what the symptoms were and the things that I'd always struggled with, and like these weird little OCD tics, just these little compulsions and inabilities, like just social rifts, that kind of thing. When I explained all of that to my dad, he dismissed it and said, oh, so what, I've got the same thing, like all those, that's all normal.
So like, and that happens with a lot of mental health issues.
I think really that is a big thing, is that people come to assume that they must be normal, and that all of those things that they think are weird are just in their head. But I think that if a lot more people spoke about it, we would have a different view on mental illness. It wouldn't be so much like you are defective in some way. It's just that like it's almost a way of categorizing people and solving problems that are individual. And there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing like wrong with being born with Asperger's, or there's nothing wrong with being bipolar. Like, it's just a matter of, it's like having cancer. No one would blame you for that. Like, if you got your legs blown off by a landmine, even if you were doing something stupid, no one would just like leave you to die because you did a dumb thing and you like broke your head because you like skateboarded without a helmet. They take care of you, like they get you back to where you need to be, like, and I don't think that it's fair that just because a problem is either self-inflicted or invisible,
or it doesn't fit in with society's expectations for what is something that we need to deal with.
Exactly. And I mean, obviously having no legs is a significant disability, and we'd all be pretty fucked if we all had no legs. But that doesn't mean that we just dismiss everyone who has no legs like as a fuck up. Like
Yeah.
you know, like, and that seems to be the way that like mental illness and addiction problems are viewed. Like, oh screw it, that person, they made their mistakes, they're an idiot.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a solution to a problem.
Yeah.
That's just ignorance.
And we didn't actually talk that much about your dad, but you like obviously really love your dad, and he did make a massive effort to like try and improve the family situation and everything.
He is basically the example that I live by, as much as he might sort of resent that a little, because he never wanted me to end up like him, I don't think. That's just the way it is. Because he worked full time, he was an honest person. Even with that whole thing where my parents got in trouble for stealing all these computers, I read the news articles and it is like clearly outlined that he was fully against the idea.
Yeah.
And my mum just rocked up with these computers and he was like, oh well fuck, now we've got to get rid of them and sell them, right? So, you know, people get like, I guess, pushed into situations that are not ideal. And because he loved my mum, obviously, of course he didn't just go to the cops and rat her out. Why would he? You know, that's not what you do.
So he was absolutely doing his best. Like.
Yeah, he totally did his best, like my whole life. And I think that that's the kind of example that people don't see. Because nobody knew.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing, is that people only see drug addicts when they come out as a problem. They don't see the drug addicts who are going to work every day, who are just smoking weed when they get home. They don't see the people who had a heroin addiction like my dad did and beat it and then tried his best to raise his family. They don't see any of those stories. They only see the fuck-ups, the homeless people, the people that have been overlooked by the system and fallen through the cracks.
Yeah.
That's the only examples that you get of drug addicts. When there are plenty of drug addicts who contribute to society and do their best and don't take from others. And they really are just an example of a good person who is leaning on a vice, the same as smoking or drinking.
And they're just trying to make it through the day just like everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that people have to deal with in their own minds are so painful that without something to alleviate that pain, you would rather be dead. And you would not ask someone to live through that kind of physical pain. So I think to ask someone to just keep going with whatever is just debilitating them mentally, because, oh, that's not the way we deal with things, is really short-sighted.
Yeah. And there's just one more thing I wanted to talk to you about. Pretty much everyone that I've spoken to about mental health has said that it's like near impossible to get a public hospital to take you seriously and admit you unless it's completely fucked.
That's been a real problem since I was a teenager. The first time my mum went properly, I guess, manic, she knew that she was going off the air, and she tried to get herself help first. And the public health system really sort of failed her in that, and it had to take her throwing herself off our balcony and breaking her leg before she was even looked at. They told her that she was lying. They told me that my mum was lying about her own fear of going crazy, which I think is ludicrous. No one is afraid of going crazy so badly that they go and seek treatment just to make something up, like what, just for attention? Like, and if they do need attention that badly, I think they probably deserve
There's
it.
probably something that
There's
needs
a
to be
real
observed.
problem there, yeah. Like, and it's been really baffling because I've witnessed it since I was a kid. The cops will come out to a domestic disturbance and they can't do anything about it until someone's hurt. And it's very much the same with the public health system, is that until someone's been attacked or they've hurt themselves, there is no problem that needs to be solved, you know. And I've seen my brother go in there countless times now. He's gone in there, and that's been hard because my mum, you know, I was prepared for that. She's been in and out of the psych ward a lot now, and you know, she's very uncooperative.
Yeah.
So she's had a couple of assault charges laid against her with paramedics and nurses, that kind of thing. But my brother has always been, he is like the best you could hope for in someone who's losing their mind. When he is psychotic, he is cooperative and he's scared, but he trusts me and he'll go to the hospital even though I know he doesn't want to. But because my mom is less cooperative, she gets put into like the I guess maximum security area. But it's very strange because the last time that she tried to kill herself, the time that she was most successful actually, was because she was in the maximum security AOA, and I mean, I don't know why, but they give the people razors to shave with.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, she slit her wrists, and I don't know what that's about. Like, I was pretty angry when I heard that. I called up the hospital and asked what they're doing, giving razor blades to suicidal people.
Yeah.
It just seems ridiculous to me. And they said that they can't take away their human rights or something. I don't know. They strip them down naked and give them drugs that they haven't asked for, but
No.
God forbid they be hairy, right?
Yeah,
I don't know. I have very little faith in a lot of systems these days.
yeah, we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, I think that really is the case. I think just the way that things are viewed is just pretty way off. And it's not that I don't have sympathy for the actual individuals working in those places, because oh my God, they are overworked.
Yeah.
Those places are filled because, and really it's the drug problem is that bad. Because not all of the people in the psych wards, like I've had to visit them quite a lot in there, and not all of them are there for drug problems, but every time my mum or my brother has been in there, they've met at least 5 new people who had the exact same addiction issues that they had.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know that crystal meth is like relatively new in the way that we do it now, I guess. You know, speed's been around, amphetamines have been around, but crystal meth is particularly potent and particularly damaging, I think, from what I've seen, because those behaviors don't just come from nowhere.
Yeah.
And I think that just because so many things are illegal, and that is, you know, for our own good and whatever like that, I think that not enough actual information is being put out there about it.
Yeah, there's definitely something going on where we're not looking at reality, we're looking at this like idealistic model of reality that we want to have.
Yeah, exactly. So just ignoring the problems entirely as if they shouldn't exist, so therefore they don't, like, is just really naive. And with how accessible it is, I think if they don't start looking at solving the problem instead of ignoring it, they're going to have a really big problem on their hands.
Yeah.
Like, the statistics are getting worse, you know, and that's for people who've admitted that they're on drugs. I mean, I haven't even told anyone who's asked me any shit like that statistically, so how many other people are there who've never even said anything?
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, I really think that the public health system is not really prepared to deal with the problem that they've got on their hands right now.
Yeah.